Hello everyone, in this tutorial what I'll be covering is how to simply create a MySQL database. There are different ways you can create and manage a database, but in this tutorial and following tutorials, I will be using a popular free service called Phpmyadmin to create and manage MySQL databases. So what I will first show you how to do if you are using XM is how to access Phpmyadmin. Next, I will show you how to simply go about accomplishing the same task if you are using a live web hosting account powered by cPanel. So the first thing that you want to make sure is running is under your controls once XMP has launched is make sure Apache is running or you have started it, and also make sure MySQL has been started. And if you're using a PC, this may look a little bit different for you, so I will put up a screenshot what this should look like. So once those two have started, go over to your browser and type in localhost. This screen should pop up for you, and under the left column, find tools and then find Phpmyadmin. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And here you can see we have a lot going on within this system or on this page. And just to go ahead and point out, I'm not going to go over everything there is to know about Phpmyadmin, but I am going to help expose you to some of the main features or some of the main fundamentals of Phpmyadmin. So here to the left, we have a list of our different databases. And in the parentheses, that number stands for the amount of tables within that database. So if we click on blog, here you can see a list of tables on the left as well as on the right. So if I click on contest, here you can see a list of our rows as well as our fields or our different columns. And here you can see I have username, contest num, contest video link, and under here I have a list of users for this particular table. So that's just a basic layout of a database. So let's create our own database, which will be a lot simpler. It won't have as many tables. So let's go ahead and go back to home. And next under MySQL localhost, you can see create new database. So let's take the example from the last tutorial, the phone book example. So let's create a database called phone book. All right. And we're going to leave everything else the same. And we're going to click on this create button. Next, as you can see, we have our database here listed, and again in the parentheses it shows the amount of tables you currently have in your database. Obviously we have no tables, so let's create a table. In this table we're going to name it contacts. And next we have the number of fields. Again, as I showed you in the blog and the contest table, we had different fields and different columns. One was username, one was contest num, etc. So for us, we're going to have first name, last name, and phone number. So that's 3 fields. We're going to type 3 there. Then we're just going to click on go. And as you can see here, we have our different fields that we can configure. So for this first row called field, we're just going to type out the name for this field. We're going to say first name here. The next one, we're going to say last name. And in the last one, we're going to say phone number. All right, so next in the next row, we have type. You can think of this as data type. And as you can see, it already has integer selected. But when we click on this drop down menu, as you can see, we have a lot of different types that we can select. But in these tutorials, all I'm going to expose you to here is integer and something what's called variable character or varchars, what some people like to call it. And you can think of this as a string. So we have an integer and a string that we're going to be using. So for first name, we want that to be a string, as well as for last name. And since the phone number can contain dashes, we want to make sure that's a string as well. Now for the next row, we have length or values. You can think of this as what is the maximum number of characters that we want to allow a first name or last name or phone number to have. So for example, if I type 6 here and I type in a name that is longer than 6 characters, any characters after that 6th character is going to be truncated. And I'll show you an example of this later. So I'm just going to keep 6 there, and for the last name I'm going to put 15, and for phone number I'm going to put 12. Now we have default. Now this row is basically if we don't type anything in, for example, in the first name field, and we type something in for last name and for phone number, what do we want to put in the first name by default if the user leaves this blank. And this is optional, but we're not going to really get into this, but this is what this row would be for. What would you want to put in this field by default if we leave it blank? But anyway, for the rest of the rows, again, we're not going to get too deep into this. We're going to leave those as they are. And after you're done making all your modifications, you just click on Save. Now, as you can see, it says table, contacts has been created. So if we click on this contacts table, as you can see, we have our different fields. Now, let's try to insert some data inside this table, or let's insert a record. So if I click on this Insert tab, here under Value, I can type my first name. I'm going to say Robert. Then last name, I'm going to say Smith. And then I'm just going to put in a fake number here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. And after I'm done doing that, I can hit go. And as you can see, we have one row inserted. And also underneath this is an important point here, is we have a query that has been ran in the background, basically. So for now, I'm just going to copy this because I want to explain this a little bit more to you in a second. But if I go ahead and click on contacts over here to the left, as you can see, we now contain one row in this table, Robert Smith. Now that query I just copied is something similar to what we're going to be having to do when we mix up PHP and MySQL together. So if I click on this MySQL tab, here is where I can run custom queries to do certain things to the database. So like I said, that query I just copied was done in the background when we actually inserted that user into that table. So if I paste that here again, let's reevaluate it this time. Here we have insert into, and I'm not going to go too in depth into this, but I want to help expose you to it. We got insert into, and then we say phone book. So we're saying insert into the database called phone book, but we need to get a little deeper in here. What if we had multiple tables, right? So we need to say insert into the database phone book inside the table contacts, and then inside contacts, what fields do we even care about to access or to insert this data into? So we have first name, last name, and phone book. Then finally, we have values. What values do you want to insert into these fields that you just indicated up here that you want to insert data into? So we have to give them, or give this query, 3 different values, since up here we indicated that we're accessing those 3 different fields. All right, so here I can also add someone inside this database using this query. So I'm going to say Sally, and I'm going to say Sally, let's say Sally Green, S Green, it doesn't matter. Let's delete that. And I'm going to leave the number the same. So now I can hit go. And as you can see here, we have one row that was inserted. So if I click on contacts here again over to the left, as you can see, Sally Green was added just fine. So you can also see we have 2 different methods for inserting data within Phpmyadmin. So for some of you, you probably say, well, that insert method was a lot easier. I didn't have to worry about making sure I was typing everything okay and putting it in the right spot. But when we get into PHP and we start writing queries, you might want to start to get used to seeing things like this, because in PHP, we have to tell it which fields we want to access and what values you want to put inside those fields. So now if I go back to contacts, now let me show you an example if we typed in a name that was longer than 6 characters. So if I go back to the easier method for inserting data, let's put, well, we know Robert is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 characters long. So if I put anything after this, say SSS, all those S's are going to be truncated because we indicated here that we only want to allow 6 characters for this data type. So for last name, I'm just going to leave that Smith, again, a fake number, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, I'm going to hit go. And as you can see, we have the row, it was inserted, but we also have a warning. It says the data truncated for column first name at row 1. So if I go ahead and click on contacts over here to the left, as we can see, it added me to the database. However, it truncated any characters after that 6th character. So let's say, well, maybe 6 characters isn't enough for the first name. Maybe we have some names that may be added that are longer than 6 characters. So what we can do is click on this structure tab, and then for the first name field, go over here to action. Under action, you should see a pencil. Click on that, and here we can just change this to whatever we like. Let's put 15, and then hit save. And that's all you have to do. All right, so the last thing I want to show you here really quickly is, say for example, we want to add an additional field here. We say, well, we got first name, last name, phone number, but we want to collect more data about this person. Let's say we want to collect the zip code as well. Well, if you want to add an extra field, that's pretty simple as well. If you come down here, we have add, and then we can say the number of fields, and then we have several options that indicate where do we want to add this new field. Do we want it to be at the top? Do we want it to be at the beginning? Or do we want it to be like in the middle of last name and phone number? So for zip code, let's just put that at the bottom. So we can leave this at end of table, and then we can click on this go button. So again, we want this to be zip code. And for the data type, we can leave that as integer, and the length, let's put 5 here. And then let's just click on save. So as you can see, it added zip code after phone number. All right, so now that you have a little bit more knowledge about what Phpmyadmin and the different things you can do with it, let's now dive into how to complete the same process for a live web hosting account. So if you log into your cPanel account, you should have a screen similar to this. And here you can see I have MySQL databases, then Phpmyadmin. So the first thing that I'm going to do is create the database. So if I click on that, we have this create new database area. So I'm going to create the same type of database. We're going to say phone book. All right. And then I'm going to click on create database. Then I'm going to click on go back. And if we scroll down some, we can see that the current database that we did create is listed here. However, there's no users associated with this database. And what I mean by that is we don't have anyone out there in the field who has access to manage, update, insert, delete data from this database. So you may be wondering, well, XAMPP, I didn't see where you was doing that with XAMPP. Well, with XAMPP, by default, if we come back over here to the getting started screen, if you come under here where what's the username and password for MySQL, we already have one by default already created for all our databases. And that username is root, and by default, it doesn't have a password. But when you're in a live web hosting environment, that may not be the case. So now we need to create a user who can access our database. So if we scroll down under add new user, I might have a user called Robert. And then I might create a password for him. And then I click on create user. Then I go back. Robert still isn't associated with this database. So if I scroll down some more under add user to database, if I select Robert, then I select the database phone book, then I click on add. Now I'm presented with a screen that allows me to give him certain privileges, or I can make him like a super admin. He can do everything, create, delete, create temporary tables, everything. So if I click on all privileges and make changes and click on go back and scroll down, as you can see, we now have a user who has access or permission to carry out certain actions on our database. All right, so now that our database is created, let's go back home, and now let's click on Phpmyadmin. Now, this should look familiar. The graphics are a little bit more enhanced, or it looks a lot better, but in a way, it has the same concept, or the features are usually laid out the same here. But in a way, to the left, we have our different databases again. So if I click on phone book, you can see we currently have no tables created. So let's quickly create a table again. Let's call it contacts. And then the number of columns, let's just do 3 this time and hit go. And as you can see, we have the structure. And in the first row, you can see that they're calling it column, which I think is a better name than field. So in a way, here's where we type the name of that column. We're going to say first name, then last name, then phone book. And then again, for the type, let's just make that a varchar, and varchar. Length, let's again make this 15, 15, and 12. Again, the same process here. And then I'm just going to click on save. So as you can see, our table is now created. I can go over here and click on it, and then I can insert some data just like I did a minute ago. And then I can add someone to it. Let's say Nas, let's say Smith, and then let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4. And also, just to point out, I can put dashes in here. This is a string, so I can pretty much put anything I want to in here, and then I can hit go. As you can see, one row is inserted. So if I click on this table again, here you can see the record or the row that was inserted. So as you can see, it's a very similar process. So that does conclude this tutorial. So hopefully now you have a better understanding about what Phpmyadmin is, what it's used for, how to use certain features. And in this tutorial, I was mostly showing you how to create a database. So be sure to take the online quiz at the phpbasics.com to make sure that you understand some of these basic concepts for creating databases within Phpmyadmin. So I will see you in the next video.